Welcome to gardening video number 4, Where to Put Your Garden Part 1, Tracking the Sun and Shadows. We know that plants need sun to grow, but most new gardeners, including myself when I first started, we never think to map the sun throughout the day and see where the shadows fall from trees and fences and buildings and such, and see how that could affect the plants that we grow. That's what we're going to do today. So what you can do is get up one morning and just walk around your property and go ahead and pick out several spots that you think might make a good place to put your garden. And every few hours or so, go out to your spots and see if you're getting direct sunlight there, or whether those spots are being blocked by shadows from trees and fences and buildings. And once you do that, go ahead and write it down, because if you're anything like me, you're going to forget. And at the end of the day, you should know how many hours of direct sunlight each of your spots get. This is a crude sun map I did of my property back in April. And by the way, you should probably do this when it's spring or summer, when all the leaves have grown in. In any event, here's a rough outline of my property here. And I drew a picture of my house and some of my gardens here. And then in the morning, I tracked where the sun rose and way down here where the sun sets. So this is the eastern direction and this is the western direction. That's about the line there, so you can see my property tilts slightly towards the south. And every couple hours or every hour I went out and tracked the sun's path. So here in the western hemisphere of the United States, the sun will track in the southern hemisphere this way, so it's not direct sunlight overhead. So when you have the sun in the morning here, it'll track shadows to the west, and then throughout the day it'll track shadows towards the west, and then later towards the night it'll track shadows back towards the east. So if you can find a spot on your property line somewhere on the south side that doesn't have any shadows from any fences or trees or buildings, that's a great spot to choose. So let's take a tour of my property and see some spots that we could put a garden in. This spot here is where I put my first garden many years ago. And as you can tell, the shadows are already encroaching on the area. And it's only 10 o'clock in the morning. And when I started it, we had 3 big apple trees right here, so the shadows were much bigger and they cast way over towards my kid's trampoline right now. And you might say, why would I have chosen an area like this? Well, it's simple. I decided to start my garden in the fall when the leaves were all falling off the tree and everything looked great. And that area ended up pretty much being a disaster. So if this is an example of why you would want to do a sun map of your property before you start a garden. This area is a great sunny spot in the eastern side of my property. So by just sun alone, this would be a great spot to put a garden, or it would appear to be a great spot. But in the next couple of videos, I'll explain why this is not the best place for a garden. I'll give you a little hint. See that barn way up there? Yeah. This is my current south side garden. It's a great spot because it gets about 8 or 9 hours of direct sunlight. Here is my property line right here, the south property line, so there's nothing over here really to block the sun from this area. This is the north side of my house. I used to have a garden plot right over here, and this area was pretty good for the sun. It got about 5 or 6 hours of direct sun. There is my house right up here that casts a little bit of shadow, but that wasn't really a big issue. The noisy air conditioning unit probably an issue right now, but in any event, I did take this garden down. It wasn't for the lack of sun. It was for something else, which I'll speak about in the next video. You can probably tell, though. A little hint here. And this is the southern part of my front field. And you would think that, as I said before, the southern part is the best spot, but only if you don't have anything blocking your sun. In this instance, all these pine trees, they'll pretty soon block a good majority of this, so it's not really a good place to put that. So instead, I went ahead and put my main front field garden on the north side of my property, because my neighbor doesn't have anything over there really to block the sun, and it makes a great spot that gets a lot of sunlight. And once you've inventoried all your spots for sun and shadows, you'll be in a better position to decide where to place your first garden. Now, you'll probably want to grow as many vegetables as you can when you start your first garden, so it's good to know that some of these vegetables have different categories. As you can see here on this sheet of paper, hopefully, they are full sun vegetables that require 6 to 8 hours of direct sun. Some examples are tomatoes, peppers, cukes, and squash. Then you have partial sun vegetables, which require 4 to 6 hours of sun. beets, broccoli, cabbage, carrots. And then you have your shade-tolerant vegetables that only need about 2 or 4 hours. Lettuce, spinach, Swiss chard, and kale. And what's maddening about these lists is sometimes you'll see some of these things put on another list. So don't get too stressed out about memorizing these lists or freaking out, are you doing it right? Just know that if you want to grow as many vegetables as you can, just pick the sunniest spot on your property that you find that gets between 6 and 8 hours. Because there's ways that you can produce shade for those other partial sun vegetables and the shade tolerant. Now, if you choose a shady spot for your garden, there's no way you can magically create sun for those vegetables that need the full sun. So don't get stressed out about all these categories and lists. Just when you're mapping the sun, just pick the spot that gets the most sun and you'll be all right. As I like to say, gardening can have rules, but you shouldn't make it feel like they're orders. And a case in point, I built a raised bed garden for my aunt, and she doesn't get direct sunlight on it until about 2:30 in the afternoon, so she might get 4.5 hours of sun, but yet her tomato plants are about 5 feet tall right now, and they're growing huge, and she says they taste great, and she's super happy. So get out there and do a sun survey of your property and choose the best spot you can find. And in our next video, we'll cover topography and water. Thanks.